Hello and welcome to NLP Foundation's Module 2. Today we're going to be discussing all about the history of NLP and how it came to form, as well as some basic foundations which you would have come across in Unlocked Potential if you've already dived into that. However, nonetheless, as you already know, if you did dive into it, that repetition is so important to the subconscious mind. So let's dive in, starting with the NLP communication model. Now, I know in Module 1, we did a quick brief overview. Again, today we're going to go slightly more into detail. However, again, in Unlocked Potential, we described as probably the best. And the reason why you're seeing this so much is because this is the foundation for everything that you're going to be learning on top of this. Like, this is the base foundation that you're going to be building your house and knowledge of NLP on. So the NLP communication model, we have 2.3 million bits that come into through our senses, which is our sight, our hearing, our smell, our touch, and our taste. So we got our visual, auditory, olfactory, kinesthetic, and gustatory. Those are the technical terms for our senses. That information then comes in and it gets deleted, distorted, or generalized, because with 2.3 million bits of information at any given second per second is a lot of information for us to take in. Far too much information for us to take in consciously without getting overwhelmed and just basically freezing up and not knowing what to do with it. So we delete information, we distort it, and we generalize it. So how we delete it is through the filters that you see below. But an example of deletion would be, for example, I used this in Unlocked Potential, but when you are responding to a client and you're on your phone or you're messaging somebody and you're trying to close a deal, for example, and your husband talks to you and says, "Hey, Rach, what do you want to have for dinner?" And you don't even hear him because you're so focused on what is available to you in front of you, what your mind is being tasked to do, which is to cater to your client and hold space for your client. That information that came in through my mind at that point in time got deleted because it didn't serve me at that point in time. An example of a distortion would be simply a misunderstanding or not seeing something the way that it actually is. Again, because how we take things in creates our reality. Perception is projection. So for example, somebody could say, "I love you," but it could mean a million different things according to the person who's taking it in. And it could mean a million different things according to the person who's taking it in based on what time of day it is, based on where it was, based on their mood that day, based on memories of what love is. And so you can see how the filters in this slide, like time, location, mood, metaprograms, language, memories, decisions, beliefs, values, and identity have an influence on how we delete, distort, and generalize, or what we end up deleting, distorting, and generalizing, which creates our internal representation, which we'll get to in a minute. A generalization, for example, is that we see all dogs as dogs, or all lampposts as lampposts, all trees as trees, because if we were walking down the street and we noticed that every single tree had different branches and different colored leaves and different knots in the wood, and every single lampshade had different characteristics, like this one had a bunch of staples in it, and this one was made out of wood, and this one was made out of steel, and this one was rotten, and this one just was looking old and shabby and bent and warped. That would be taking up far too much chunks within our mind that it would actually overwhelm us, and we would not be focusing on the task at hand, which would be maybe crossing the street safely. So we generalize information that is not necessarily fully important to us so that we can focus on what it is that we need to focus on. This, through the filters, like I mentioned, our decisions, our values, beliefs, identities, time, location, mood, metaprograms, and language and memories, then creates our internal representation. Now, our internal representation is basically what we it's a picture that is what we create through the senses. So it's what you end up seeing, hearing, feeling, and also self-talk as well. So it's visual, it's auditory, it's kinesthetic, and it's auditory digital, which is what we call our internal self-talk. So, and that is tied to the state and physiology. If you change your physiology and state, you then change your behavior. And when you change your behavior, you change your results. So changing state to create excellent behavior is exactly what we want to do. And one thing to notice is that notice your state and language and internal representations. These are things that we want to keep an eye on. Now I'm briefing over this because we've gone deep into this in Unlocked Potential, which hopefully you've already dived into. However, our state is essentially our foundation, combined with our physiology. That dictates the internal representation, and our state is what's going to dictate our behavior. Our behavior, as you know, is going to dictate our results. And NLP is all about modeling success to get the results that we desire. So now with this picture, we can then look at what internal representations are we creating within our mind? How are we utilizing the information that's coming into our minds through deletion, distortion, and generalizing through the various filters? And how is that affecting our reality? Because if we want a certain result, we have to start looking and thinking and feeling a certain way. For example, if I say, don't think of a blue or a purple tree, what are you thinking of right now? Chances are you're thinking of a blue or a purple tree, right? Because the unconscious mind cannot process negatives. It's a two-step process. The nervous system is geared toward producing behavior based on the internal representations that you make. So when I said, don't think of a blue tree, the internal representation in your mind that was created was a blue tree. And so in order to not think of the blue tree, first you have to pull up the picture of the blue tree, and then you have to say, oh no, wait a minute, I don't want to think about that. So let's add a not in there, which then cancels out the image. But in order to cancel out that image, you first have to think about the blue tree, which shows how powerful our mind is. And it also shows that we want to focus only on what we want rather than what we don't want. If you're thinking about what you don't want, you're likely going to produce behaviors that you don't want. Whereas if you think about what you do want, you'll create behaviors and results that you do want. So another example, which I love using all the time, is especially with parents, which I'm going to be learning very soon as I become a mother. I haven't experienced this firsthand, but I've been taught it throughout my training, is, for example, if you say don't spill the milk to a child, what happens? They end up throwing the sippy cup over and it ends up on the floor. They throw it over their high chair. However, if you tell the young child to hold the cup upright with two hands and do a good job, they'll do exactly that, because now you've painted a picture in their head of what it is exactly what you want them to focus on, which is to take the cup with two hands so that they don't drop it, of course, and hold it upright, rather than don't spill the milk. In order to spill the milk, they need to think of an image or a symbol in their mind of what it means to spill the milk. So think about what it is you need to change in your internal representations that are currently creating your reality. Now we're going to dive into a little bit of the history of NLP. So the history of NLP. NLP is essentially, like I said, a study of various bodies of knowledge to create and model success. So what they've done is, in NLP, how it came to form is, we have studied the best of the best, taken the best of the best, and compiled it all into one study. So in 1933, this is in your manual, that you have the hard copy manual and also the digital copy. The PDF is in this portal. You can open this up as we go along. You're going to open up to the page that is titled History of NLP, which you'll be able to find in the table of contents. So in 1933, Alfred Korzybski wrote the book Science and Sanity. It's a book on general semantics, and he said that almost all psychological problems arise from the inability of a person to traverse logical levels. Also thought a wholly processed description of human language would be developed, which is now what we call NLP. So it's this description of the human language based off of the various bodies of knowledge that NLP has been studied. Then came along Václavic, which added much of the inspiration for the linguistic portions of NLP. And then Gregory Bateson and Jay Haley spoke about ecology, so they discovered how important it is that with this study and body of knowledge to do no harm. As coaches, as practitioners, we always have our clients' best interest at heart. So is it safe? Something you want to ask yourself is it safe for me, the practitioner? Is it safe for the client? Is it safe for the world? And is it safe for the greater good of all? And is it also safe for the people around the client? If any technique that you're doing is not safe for any of those categories, then you do not practice that particular technique because it's not the most suited one. Fritz Perls was really into Gestalt therapy, and then Perls and Bateson are probably the largest inspiration for NLP in the very, very, very beginning. However, there's some more, I guess you could say, popular or influential names that have come across throughout the history of NLP, and one of them is Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Richard Bandler was a student at UC Santa Cruz, and John Grinder was a linguistics professor. Bandler was into computers, computer science, and Gestalt therapy, and he was editing a book by Fritz Perls. Decided he could do Gestalt therapy and started teaching a class. The first technique was a modeling, finding excellent behavior. So as Richard Bandler, the student, was studying this book, he noticed how easy and important it is to model success. And he took this to his professor and they started doing studies. And that was the first technique, which was modeling, finding excellent behavior, which is a huge portion, like I mentioned, of NLP. So essentially, NLP is an attitude and methodology, and it leaves behind a trail of techniques. That is why Tony Robbins always says the quote, success leaves clues. If you want to maintain or attain a certain result, all you have to do is look at the people who have done it before you, find out what they did, model that behavior, and you too will get that result. And so they take on the attitude and the methodology. Started modeling different areas from there. So Bandler was like, well, if we can model this, what else can we model? And so they started studying family therapy, hypnosis, sales, persuasion, rapport, and it exploded into various different fields. Now, there were three main people who were modeled, and their arts and their studied throughout the beginning and evolution of NLP. That was Virginia Satir, a family therapist, Milton H. Erickson, and Fritz Perls. They were modeled to find out how to create magical change in people. So what systems, Bandler was looking at, what systems were they using, how were they saying things, how can we put it into a structure so that you can create a result and teach it to other people to use. And he would think, I wonder how they do it. If you just break something down, you can understand how it works. Like I said, that's modeling. All you have to do is pull all the pieces together apart to put it back together to make sure that it works for you too. So if you're inspired by a great speaker or a highly influential coach, you can model them so that you can get the same outcome. Take note of what they're doing. And when you become a master practitioner, there's actually an NLP formula on modeling. You have a formula to model success successfully. Therefore, you can always get whatever result you desire simply by knowing how to model. So NLP essentially begins with curiosity. We don't ask what is broken in NLP. We look and know that what they are doing is the best they can do with the resources they have in the situation they are in. And then we help them to gain a more resourceful state. So that is actually one of the presuppositions of NLP, which we'll get into a little bit later, which is almost like, I like to call them like the 10 commandments of NLP, where it's like, technically there are assumptions and rules that we kind of live by, but to me, 10 commandments sounds a little more fun, but they're basically foundational rules. So it also takes a willingness to experiment with ecology, which Bandler was really good at experimentation. He realized that there was no such thing as failure, only feedback, which is another presupposition. There was a willingness of experiment. We're willing to go through the things that may not work to find the things that do work. And that's how you find success. So you don't just learn and model the techniques. I want you to commit to practicing them daily and implementing them. When you do, you'll change inside yourself. So with that in mind, I'd like you to just take a minute to breathe in through your nose, exhale out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose again. Exhale out through your mouth. One more time, in through your nose. Exhale out through the mouth. And to help you commit to practicing these techniques daily and implementing them so that you can model the techniques successfully, I'd like to speak to your unconscious mind with your permission. And with your permission, I'd like to speak to your unconscious mind and give you suggestions to make a difference at the conscious level and unconscious level, so that by the end of this program, you'll have the exact results that you desire. You'll feel confident to show up and share your message, and you'll share helpful content that you've learned in this certification. And you'll start helping people and making such a difference. You'll even get messages from people saying how much your work and your knowledge and your magic has changed and created transformation within their lives. And you'll start making the money you deserve by doing what you love and making an impact easily and effortlessly. I believe that people who want to help the world and want to have more money so that they can do so are the ones who deserve to have it all. You deserve to have the things you want, to feel fully happy and supported. And when you fully step into that power and believe that you deserve all the happiness in the world, you'll find the universe supports you. And I know that you're here right now because you want to make a difference. You want to inspire people. You want to step into your power and share your voice and make an impact. And you're doing exactly that already by committing to this practice, by committing to this program, and by committing to yourself. And so I know that you're going to. You're going to take up space. You're going to shine your light, and you are going to build an incredible empire. So now let's talk about Milton H. Erickson for a minute. Milton was also amazingly curious. He was one of the most famous hypnotists and probably the best who has ever lived to this point. Erickson had a special way of causing change in people. It usually started with a client sitting in Erickson's office while Erickson began to tell a story, which was simply just conversational hypnosis. Before you knew it, he was thanking the client for coming, and you'd usually be wondering why he didn't hypnotize you. But people would miraculously change. And now, one of my favorite stories is that one day, a very young Milton Erickson was walking in a town near his, and he heard an incredible noise. As he rounded the corner, he looked toward the noise and saw an amazing factory. And above the huge doors, it said, "So-and-so Boiler Factory." There was a title of some sort. Now you know, back in the old days, they used to heat the buildings with large boilers. And so Milton thought to himself, there's something to learn here. Making his way over to the factory, he said the doors grew more and more immense the closer he got. And when he finally got there, the doors were towering over him and the noise was incredibly loud. As he reached out, he said he could feel the weight of the huge doors in his hands. And he opened the doors and took a step inside. As the doors closed behind him, he said the light changed and the noise overtook him. He said he could hardly even hear himself think. As he looked around the boiler factory, Milton said he could see workers milling around and discussing things with each other. And he wondered how it was that they were able to learn to communicate inside the boiler factory. So again, he thought there's something to learn here about how to communicate inside this place. So he went up to one worker and asked him about it. The worker simply shrugged and turned around. He went up to another who was telling him things, but Milton couldn't hear a word he said. So he finally asked, "Can you have the boss come outside? I'd like to speak to the boss. Have the boss come outside." So the manager meets him outside the huge doors, and Milton says, "I'm a student of learning, and I'd like to learn to communicate inside the boiler factory. Would it be okay if I were to sleep here for the next 3 days?" The manager said, "Sure." So Milton went home and got himself a blanket and a pillow and returned to the factory. He opened the huge heavy doors, stepped across the threshold, and as the light changed and the noise overtook him inside, he began to look at what's really going on here. Everywhere he looked, he could see workers doing their thing. And up above, he watched as they took these huge sheets of steel out of the sheets of steel place. They were about 25 feet by 20 feet, very, very large. And they would take them and wrap them up, sealing it all inside. And they would seal it with rivets, riveting, 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 all the way down. And they might put one rivet every 3 feet, or 2 every 1 feet, or maybe 3 rivets every 1.5 meters. So Milton set off to find a place where it's safe to sleep here for about 3 days. So he found the perfect place where he was, set down his pillow and his blanket, and laid down his head. Now, he said, at first the noise was filling his head, but little by little he was able to push it outside until round about 8 p.m. he drifted off to sleep, so his unconscious mind could get to the task of learning. Milton was one of my favorite people in the history of hypnosis. I mean, imagine sleeping in a boiler factory to learn how to communicate. He was always putting himself in these situations where he could learn amazing. Work on changing your attitude and how you think. There's always something to learn. That's what it came down to. There was always something to learn. He was always curious. And the more curious you are, the more you'll learn. And the more you learn, the better results you will get. So that brings us to Virginia Satir. Virginia Satir is the guru of family therapy. Magical changes would happen in her office, and Bandler and Grinder wrote a book with her called Changing the Families before the formal beginnings of NLP. She was all about getting down to specifics. So if a man or a woman said, "He hurt me," she would say, "Well, how specifically?" And Bandler and Grinder found that getting more specific was a thing simply by modeling her behavior and her expertise. So if somebody said how specifically, what she would do is she could recognize and master fights between couples. For example, if somebody said, well, she doesn't see it how I see it, well, he just doesn't feel how I feel, she was able to pick up on how people use language. So in that context, she doesn't see it how I see it, and well, he doesn't feel how I feel. The couple in this example, one's using visual language and the other is using kinesthetic language. So they're not communicating in the same way. So Satir helped clients understand and translate the different internal representations that they were each using. And through that, like I mentioned, Bandler and Grinder found that getting more specific was the thing. So through working with Virginia Satir and the work she was doing, they created the meta model, a model of working with clients and a model of language that was inspired by Satir and how she communicated. There's 2 amazing books that you can read, which are The Structure of Magic, Volume 1 and 2. Erickson, Bandler, and Grinder found that he was getting results, or sorry, getting change by being more general and vague, which is the complete opposite of the meta model. So Bandler and Grinder were studying Satir, she was getting super specific, and they were also studying Erickson, as mentioned, another highly influential and highly successful practitioner, just in a different field, which was hypnosis. And he was getting amazing results and change by being more vague. So, for example, this then became the meta model, which is the complete opposite, the Milton model. The meta model and Milton model are complete opposite. For example, I'm always trying really hard to persuade my husband positively. And instead of saying, well, how specifically, like Satir would, Milton would say, for what purpose? He would have them look at the bigger picture. He would be chunking up rather than chunking down, which is a way of how we're going to be using language, and you'll be learning more about chunking up versus chunking down throughout this program. From this, like I mentioned, the Milton model was created. So meta model is all about chunking down and getting specific, which was created by Satir or modeled by Satir. And the Milton model was modeled by Milton, which is all about chunking up, getting more vague and looking at the bigger picture. Some other books you can think about are The Patterns of Hypnotic Techniques of Milton H. Erickson, and Volume 1 and 2. So about this point, they started to include representational systems, which describes how people think, you know, those pictures in the mind that we mentioned based off of the NLP communication model. NLP didn't get popular till they added anchoring based off of the work of Ivan Pavlov. Now, Ivan Pavlov is super popular. You've probably heard this story before, but anchoring is essentially it's a stimulus response. You can anchor someone to a certain emotion, feeling, memory, or more by using a stimulus, and in that way, it creates a response. So for example, you've heard the story of, maybe you haven't, but many people have, is the story of he was studying with dogs, and he would ring a bell, and he would, every time he rang the bell, they would put food out, and the dogs would start to salivate because they knew that the food was coming. And the dogs became so conditioned that all Pavlov had to do was just ring the bell. And even when he rang the bell and no food was being given to the dogs, they would still begin to salivate because they were then expecting the food. So that's a way of creating a stimulus response. In 1902, Dr. Edmund B. Twitmeyer was studying the knee-jerk reaction, which was a presentation to American Medical Association. And for example, this is when you go to the doctor and the doctor hits you on the knee and the reflex and the knee-jerk reaction, they call it the knee-jerk reaction, right? When they hit you on the knee and it just kind of, the knee swings out. And you can just signal that to their mind and thoughts, and that something is going to hit them in the knee and still get that reaction. So how many times have you gone to the doctor, they hit you on the knee, and you already know that your knee's just going to swing out because you've been conditioned for that to happen. You expect it to happen rather than it just actually always happening. So it shows that it's not the knee itself, but more the conditioning. And so from there, in 1904, Pavlov made his presentation to the Russian Medical Society on the stimulus response and conditioned reflexes. So Dr. Edmund B. Twitmeyer came first, and then Pavlov did this experiment with the dogs, and I said bell, but it was actually a tuning fork. Pavlov shortly followed and did that experiment that I just shared with you. And from this, it spawned the field of behavioral psychology. In NLP, anchoring is used based on conditioned response based on Pavlov's findings. So another book you can read is Frogs into Princes. Now, all these books I'm recommending, they are not fully mandatory, but they are recommendations. The more you read, like I said, the more you get curious, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better results you get. Another book you can look at is NLP Volume 1 with Robert Dilts, Judith DeLoisier, and Leslie Cameron Bandler as new authors, as well as Bandler and Grinder. Fantastic, fantastic book. Basically teaches you NLP, but I mean, you're doing this right here. So if you want more of a history and body of knowledge of NLP, you can read that book. And it also includes information from work by Miller, Galanter, and Pribram, who are also, if you look at the history of NLP within your manual, these are all names that have come up. And in this book, we talk about the TOTE model, which you learn as a master practitioner. So let's go on to defining NLP. Now that we kind of know the history of NLP, how it came to form, what it's all about, let's talk about how we took all these various bodies of knowledge that have been heavily studied by science and what we did to bring them all together. We took the best of the best. So in layman's terms, defining NLP is a respectable body of knowledge drawn from several respectable and established fields like hypnotherapy, family therapy, behavioral psychology, and so much more. Focuses on what works and incorporating it into the field, how to produce results in many fields. And then it says page 6 on the manual. So this is where we go into the formal definition of NLP. I'd like to point out that it's likely not page 6 on the manual because we've added more to the curriculum, and the curriculum is always changing. So as such, the manual is always changing. So what I recommend to do is look at the table of contents and find this page that says definition of NLP. That will serve you best. So the definition of NLP, well, neuro-linguistic programming. So let's break it down. Neuro, our nervous system and our mind, that's what it stands for, has to do with how we experience our world through our senses. So visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. Linguistic is the language and other communication we use to store the experience and give it meaning. So that's the pictures, the sounds, the feelings, the smells, the tastes, and also the internal dialogue, the self-talk. Essentially, the neuro part is how we're taking these in through our senses and these experiencing it and internalizing them into language to understand something. So it's the meaning that we attach to it. And then the programming component is discovering and using the programs, patterns, and strategies that we run inside our mind to achieve our goal and how we process that info and take it in. So in a nutshell, like I mentioned, NLP is the study of excellence, which you've all committed to since you're here. So congratulations. So the 6 principles of success. Before NLP was around, many therapists, coaches, and practitioners didn't have an outcome for sessions. Can you imagine that? Just walking into an office and kind of just talking about your day or what was going on through your week and never really getting anywhere. I wonder if you've had that experience before. I know I have. I've been through therapy almost my whole life. And I've had some therapists who have been great at getting results and great at getting outcomes. And then others where there was no set end result, no set end goal. And so it was really just about talking about my feelings at that time, which wasn't actually serving me because there was no solution being given or provided. So the first step or the sixth principles of success, with the first principle being that you must always know your outcome. How do you want to feel? What do you want to experience? And I want you to think about this as you go through this training. What is the outcome of this? What is the outcome of this particular training that you want? Is it that you want to help clients? Do you want to become a master at mindset? Do you see yourself becoming a certified master life coach and become a master at this work? Or perhaps even you see yourself as a trainer so that you can teach others and help others even further, like I'm doing right now. Whatever it is, know the outcome that you are aiming for so that it adds meaning and you have an end result. And that's the problem. So many people know exactly what they don't want, but they don't know what they do want. And that's a great start. However, in order to get a desired result, we need to know exactly what we do want. So when you're moving towards something, you have to have a clear focus. And it's like a clear focus of what it's like to achieve that end goal. So what will you see? What will you hear? What will you feel? The next thing is to take real action. So this means more than planning and journaling. That is something that I'm great at teaching my clients. If you're a previous client of mine, you know that I recommend making a business plan. I recommend doing the journaling and the mindset work or the manifestation work, but you also have to take the action. Just creating a plan, just writing your affirmations is not going to get you there. If you're creating a coaching program, this means that if you're creating a coaching program, you're actually building out the modules or sales page. You're speaking to people about what you have to offer. You're building your email list. You're growing it. You're doing everything that you need to do, plus the journaling, meditating, and visualizing to get you to your end result. Because the meditating and the visualizing alone isn't enough. The next one is to pay attention to your results. So use your sensory acuity. We discussed this a little bit in Module 1, and we're going to be discussing it a little bit more. But when you use your sensory acuity, you can tune into the things that are happening around us. What is the feedback that you're getting? Do you need to change your approach? Look for the positive results as well. Remember that in NLP, there is no failure, only feedback. So often it's easy to get down and out on ourselves and be like, oh, well, I'm not getting the results I wanted. This failed. I wanted 10 people in my launch. I got none. Well, great. That's not failure. That's feedback. What can you do differently? If this was your result, how can you maneuver? What more can you do? What needs to change? And then also look at the positive results. What did work well? Because what's working well means it will likely work well again. Then, like we said, be willing to change your behavior. If you're not getting the desired result, then how does your behavior need to change? Insanity is the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I'm pretty sure that was a quote by Albert Einstein. And it's so true. How many times have you expected a different result by doing the same thing and then getting frustrated with yourself and like, I don't get it. Why isn't this working? And just kind of quitting or throwing your hands up in the air. I know that's happened to me multiple times. And then I heard this quote and I was like, oh, interesting. More so around my addictions and how I was self-medicating. I would always aim to stop smoking or aim to stop drinking, but I never could. And that's because I was not changing the actual problem, which was the behavior itself. But as you learn through NLP, in order to change a behavior, we actually have to change our identity, not the behavior. So then it's assume the positive outcome and expectation, meaning focus on excellence. Focusing on excellence means we don't worry if it's not going to work out or what if this doesn't happen. We're assuming that the positive outcome and expectation is just bound to happen. Our truth is our truth. It's ours for the taking. It actually already is ours. It's here and now, just simply on its way to us. So if you are building a business, which you likely are because you're in this course, assume that you are already that multimillionaire. How are you using that money to make a difference in the world and the people you love? Act and feel that it's yours and be in full alignment with it. I am are two of the most powerful words you can use. So make sure that you're using the words I am in alignment with who you want to be. For example, when you say I am successful, you already are because you're here taking this course. You already are because you're listening to this module. You already are because you're showing up for the group coaching calls. You already are because you're taking the action. And you already are because you are consciously, right here, right now, doing the work necessary to reprogram your subconscious mind so that you can step into your next level identity. And then the last principle of success is live with gratitude and integrity. Meaning, do what you say you're going to do because you've set out for that goal. And so you need to therefore get the results. And here's one thing that I always tell my clients, my one-on-one VIP clients. Whenever they sign a contract with me, I always send them a welcome letter. Here's the contract, yada, yada. And at the bottom, I always say, congrats. Make sure you celebrate yourself tonight. And then I share with them the reason behind celebrating. So this has to do with living with gratitude and integrity. The reason why we celebrate is because we are telling our mind that we do exactly what we set out to do. Meaning, when we hit that goal, that one simple task that we just gave ourselves, then makes it easier for us to show up in our next level identity that we're currently embodying for the bigger, scarier, heftier goals, because we've told our mind that we do what we do. So the subconscious mind really likes a strong commander. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you become the authority for yourself and your subconscious mind, it's more likely to then take orders when you're in alignment, when you say what you're going to do. So a simple act or simple task, as we call them in NLP, when you're tasking a client, is to make sure you celebrate yourself. That is something so simple that they should be doing. You should be honoring yourself for taking for taking any commitment, even signing up for this. You know what? I haven't told you guys to celebrate yourself yet, but let's do this. I want you guys to post in the group right now how you are choosing to celebrate yourself. I want to see that, whether it's a glass of wine, a nice bubble bath, taking yourself out on a fancy date, booking a spa day, just having the day off even to just meditate and chill rather than hustle, hustle, hustle. As you'll learn in this program, it is not about the hustle, but more about the flow. Make sure you are doing anything in whatever way feels good to you to honor yourself and celebrate yourself. So with that in mind, let's talk about your goals for this training for a little bit. Now, I know we've spoken about this throughout this module a little bit, getting clarity on what it is that you want, how you want to show up, what that next level identity really is. But I want you to take the next 10 minutes to write out what it is that you really, really want. And I don't mean just becoming a certified practitioner or a masterful practitioner and coach, because that will happen. You already are one. You're here, you're doing the work, and you will absolutely become that. What I want you to really do is think about what you really, really, really want. Make them so big that if you got them, it would be the most important training you've ever taken. So what results do you want? Who do you want to be? What kind of results do you want to get for your clients? What kind of relationships do you have? Where do you want to travel? Vision map all of this out, because your subconscious mind needs a clear picture in order to align for it. And so take this time now. I'm going to play some healing music for you to really just brainstorm and free write what it is that you really want and create that picture of your next level identity so that you know exactly what you're working towards throughout this program. Welcome back. Now let's talk about states versus outcomes for a minute. So some of the goals that you might have written down might have actually been a state versus an outcome. You can open up your page in your manual to the page where it says states versus outcomes and notice what the difference is. We want to always differentiate between states and goals, especially with our clients. For example, if you wrote down in your brainstorming session that you just want to be happy, that is actually a state, not a goal. We have to have tangible goals. A goal is something that we can measure. Happiness is a state. You can feel it within seconds if you really, really wanted to. In fact, we can do that right now. I want you to close your eyes for a minute. Take a nice big deep breath in. Exhale out. Just getting in touch with your body and relaxing. And I want you to think of a time where you were completely happy. I want you to think of a specific time. Think of a specific time where you were completely, totally happy. And I want you to float down into your body and see what you saw, hear what you heard, feel what you felt in that moment. Feeling so happy. So happy. Breathing it in, noticing what's there. And then whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. How many of you feel happy or felt happiness within that moment when you were visualizing that? Right? So that is a state. We can achieve a state anytime we want. Whereas a goal or an outcome, time is usually involved. It takes time or there's steps necessary. It's measurable, a goal, and it's stated for self only, which we're going to get into in a little bit. So make sure that your goal is tangible. For example, if you want financial freedom, how much money is that? Because financial freedom, in my opinion, actually is a state, because there are people out there, there's multimillionaires and billionaires out there who are still living in fear, lack, and scarcity and worry, because to them it will never be enough. So to me, financial freedom is a state. It's something that we can choose to feel into. But if you're looking for a financial goal, how much money are you looking for or aiming for specifically? If you have a health goal that you set, how are you going to measure that? Is it by a body fat percentage? Is it by a photograph of you at your fittest? Is it a weight, which I don't recommend, because weighing yourself, it can very, very much skew your results based off of your distribution of fat versus muscle. Is it a relationship goal? Maybe you're looking to have such a healthy, happy, fulfilling relationship. What would that look like to you, and how will you know you've gotten it? Or is it a career goal? Are you now a master practitioner in NLP with Transcend Academy? Or are you a trainer? What is that next level, that full vision for you? So what I want you to do now is consider the goals you wrote, and let's talk about creating achievable outcomes for a minute. Which one of those goals that you wrote, if you were to achieve just one of them, would make this the most important training? So what is that one goal that you're going to focus on? And in your manual, there's a page called Creating Achievable Outcomes. We're going to go through this right now. I want you to just consider what happens inside when I ask you these questions. What specifically do you want? So know your outcome. What specifically do you want? And make sure it's stated in the positive. Where are you now in relation to that goal? Specify the outcome. What will you see, hear, and feel when you have it? Because the subconscious mind loves specificity, which we'll learn shortly in the upcoming modules. or you might have already in unlocked potential. When you have that picture, act as you have it now. Step out of it so that you're looking at yourself in the picture, like you're watching yourself on TV. So you're dissociated from it. Specify your evidence procedure. How will you know when you have this goal? For example, if it's a weight loss goal, you'll feel better. You'll look healthier. Your actual blood results will be healthier. The scale will show X pounds, or your body fat percentage will be X. If it's a financial goal, you'll have X amount of dollars in your bank account. If it's a career goal, maybe it's X number of clients. How will you know? Is it congruently desirable? And what will it do for you or allow for you to do? Now, this is a big one that we touched on in Unlocked Potential, and it's also one that we're going to be going into at the live immersion event. We're going to be diving deep into this at the live immersion and really, really allowing yourself to create that next level goal from that point forward. So you're creating goals right now at the beginning of the program, but then you're also going to be creating achievable outcomes by the time you exit this program. So you know exactly where you're going to be and where you want to go by the time you leave this program. So is it congruently desirable? Make sure that it's self-initiated and self-maintained, meaning that you're doing it for you because you truly want it, and you alone are able to maintain it. You don't ever want to set a goal on something that your family or your friends want you to do, or you're doing it because if you do that, then they'll love you more, because that's something that's going to allow you to actually lose motivation, and it's not going to allow you to step into your highest self. Is it appropriate in all contexts? So is it in the right context? When, where, how, and with whom do you want it? Your goal could be very different depending on the context of those things. What resources do you need? So establish the resources. This one's really fun, and this is where you get to kind of create that identity level change. What resources do you need? What resources do you have that you can use to get there? And I'm not just talking about external resources like money and stuff. Sometimes, if not all the time, the internal resources like confidence, communication, willingness and resourcefulness, persistence are resources that are far more powerful to actually help you get to where you want to be. Because they're resources that you can always depend on, and they're based on you. Do you know someone who's achieved this? What resources do you think they had? Or what resources do you know that they had? It doesn't have to be someone you know personally. Maybe it's an influencer, and I highly recommend that you reach out to them on social media and ask them what they did. And maybe they were great at overcoming their fears, or maybe they were just relentless. They didn't let failure stop them ever, because they knew that it was just feedback. What resources did they have? And can you act like someone who's done it? So acting as if. Now I want to make sure that you note that acting as if is very different from faking it till you make it. Faking it till you make it causes you to act from out of alignment. It causes you to kind of lie about who you are or what your results are. Whereas acting as if is really just embodying that next level self and showing up as that version. So if your multi-millionaire version of yourself, who's a very highly trained and masterful practitioner, creating massive results, maybe you're hosting events, maybe you're doing retreats, maybe you just have a huge roster and audience of clients that you work with virtually, whatever it might be. How does that woman or man show up? What character traits do they have? Do they second guess their results or their goals, that whether they're coming or not, or do they know that their truth is their truth? And do they expect it? So acting as if is very different from faking it till you make it. Also, when you fake it till you make it, it's almost like you don't believe that it's happening because it's not an embodiment practice, and your subconscious mind is not going to allow you to go against your beliefs, because your beliefs are at an identity level or higher up on the levels of change. And so therefore, you're not going to get the goal you want. So act as if. And then, is it ecological? Check for ecology. Is it safe for you? Is it safe for the client? Is it safe for the planet? Is it safe for those of the highest good of all? Which is an NLP presupposition. And then you're going to make sure that it's a well-formed goal. So well-formedness conditions. What I want you to do now is go ahead and rewrite the goals for success and well-formedness. You can look at your manual, make sure that it checks all the boxes. And everything we just learned are all the bases for our internal representations, which we're going to be going into deeper in the next module, which is having control over those allows us to produce successful behaviors. Because if we know how to manipulate and manage our internal representations, we can then, again, affect our state, which affects our behavior, which affects our results. Our internal representations allow us to be in control of our state, which allows us to be in control of our physiology. We can produce best possible behavior to produce the results that we want. So that's in a short form of what I just shared with you. All you got to think of: state equals behavior, behavior equals results. Whether we use this for therapy, sales, business, with clients, I meant to say, we will find that many people do not have goals, whether that's in their business, within their therapy sessions, within your own coaching sessions with your clients, maybe up until this point. We just show up hoping to get results. But now you have a formula that you can use to make sure that they have a clear pathway on how to get results always. Remember that no goals equals undirected behavior. So find out what the goal is specifically. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? You're then going to write it in present tense. For example, I now make $400,000 a year. I see this, I feel this, I hear this. I did this by, and then you list the resources that you wrote down. And then I always love adding gratitude at the end. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Focusing unconsciously on exactly what it is that you want. The end result, description of what it is you want to achieve. Something for your unconscious mind to move toward to. If you apply these principles, actually I should say when you apply these principles and put them all together, you will have an unbeatable combination for creating your future. So I want you to take this time to go ahead and rewrite that. And then we will be moving into internal representations in the upcoming module, as well as diving into the actual tools and techniques of NLP. So get ready, rewrite this, and I'll see you in the next module.